Today's reading from Rays of the One Light has the title, Does Satan Exist? And it's by Swami Kriyananda. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The Bible tells us in chapter 4 of the Gospel of St. Matthew, then, after baptism, was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. To most modern minds, this passage seems quaintly obsolete. Psychologists would say, have said in fact, that the temptation of Jesus, if it occurred at all, was purely psychological. They call it a projection of desires lurking in his own subconscious mind. The subconscious plays a strong part, certainly, even if not a unique one, in any testing the spiritual seeker must undergo. The Bhagavad Gita, in dealing with this undeniable reality, quotes Arjuna in the 3rd chapter, and then Sri Krishna's reply. Yet tell me, teacher, said Arjuna, by what force doth man go to his ill, unwilling, as if one pushed him in that path? And Krishna replied, desire it is, passion it is, born of the darknesses, which pusheth him, mighty of appetite, sinful and strong is this, man's enemy. Yet even Krishna describes passion as born of darknesses. The fact is, as Paramahansa Yogananda wrote in Autobiography of a Yogi, all thoughts vibrate eternally in the cosmos. Thoughts are universally and not individually rooted. A truth cannot be created, but only perceived. Psychology, yes, but psychology attuned to currents of consciousness that pervade the entire universe, attracted by each of us according to our own personal inclinations. Yogananda, quoted in The Path, said, I used to think Satan was only a human invention. But now I know, and I add my testimony to that of others who lived before me, that Satan is a reality. He is a universal conscious force whose sole aim is to keep all beings bound to the wheel of delusion. We should take pains, then, to attract uplifting currents of universal consciousness, and to avoid attracting the negative, which, disease that it is, can infect our thoughts, even while it leads us to believe that our thoughts are purely our own. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Welcome to all of you, also on my part and those of you who are at home. Every week in all of the Ananda centers throughout the world, we have a Sunday Satsang, and every week there is a theme that comes from both the Bhagavad Gita, interpretations by Yogananda, and also the Gospels of Jesus Christ. And we, the ministers, we don't know too much in advance, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, what the topic is going to be. But I know personally, I have my preferences. I always hope that I get the prodigal son You know, for example, what an uplifting, you know, message. God is waiting for us, even when we go astray. Or another one of my favorites is Martha and Mary. You know, sometimes I get the subject and I'm Martha, other times I'm Mary. But today I got my least favorite. And the title is, Does Satan Exist? Okay. So, echo one moment here. So let's see, does Satan exist? Okay. What do you think? Is it yes? Okay. We heard the quote from Master, and I will be quoting it again. It is a universal force, and people have had experience with Satan. Master talked sometimes about Saint Anthony of the desert. He was one of the desert fathers back in the early centuries, perhaps the first, second, or third century after the life of Christ. And he spent most of his time in a cave meditating and praying and doing penance, and he was beset by the devil for pretty much the whole time, and we're talking about decades of time. There he even saw the devil, and there were animals and monsters and everything. And finally, one of the last times that he prayed to Jesus, Jesus came in splendor of light, and the darkness disappeared. Another holy person, probably not considered a saint since the Protestants don't have saints, was Luther, Martin Luther. Luther was also beset by the devil for most of his life, and he would defend himself against the devil through prayer and through chanting of holy songs, but the devil was just after him. And one time he was so frustrated that he picked up his ink well, and he was a writer. He picked us and threw it at the devil. And so they say, it's the legend, that in his apartment at the university, where he was a professor, you can still see the ink stain on the wall. Well, we heard what Master said. And perhaps we also might think that, you know, the devil, it's just a figment of imagination. And this is another quote by Master from the Second Coming of Christ, his comments on the Gospels. There was a time when I used to believe Satan was a symbolic force, a metaphysical delusion. But now I know, and add my testimony to the testimony of Jesus Christ, that Satan is responsible for all the creation of evil on earth and in the minds of men. I have consciously seen Satan many times, obstructing me by mysterious misfortunes. Isn't that curious? Mysterious. Have you had a mysterious misfortune? Haven't we all, in some way? So, Satan obstructing us by mysterious misfortunes and by consciously taken materialized forms while I was receiving the grace of God. So Satan was there, and the grace of God was there. I had a little run-in with Satan, and it was very early. I was just a couple years on the spiritual path, and I was sleeping, and I went into that state of, what do you call it in English, dormiveglia, you know, where you're half asleep and half awake. You don't know if you're sleeping. You don't know if you're awake. I was in that state, and suddenly I felt a heavy weight on my chest, and it got heavier and heavier, and it was squeezing the breath out of me. It was squeezing the life force out of me, and I knew that it was the power of darkness that had come to take me and to kill me because I had dedicated my life to the light. It was not happy about that, so it was going to come and take me away. And there I was thinking, what can I do? What can I do? And I said, I have to call my guru. And in that moment, in my mind came the thought, but who is my guru? I mean, that's how the devil is. You know, it just gets in. And one of the strongest weapons of the devil is forgetfulness. We forget who we are. We forget who our guru is. So there I am. The weight is getting stronger and stronger. And I'm trying to call out to my guru. I can't remember. And finally, I remember Yogananda. And I just shout out his name. In that instant, it disappeared. In that very instant, it was all gone. Bringing the light, guru. Ru is darkness, and gu is light. It's the guru who leads us from the darkness of delusion into the light. Well, let's take a look at who Satan is, and let's not be afraid to do it. A friend of mine just told me a story yesterday. She said that when she was a child, she was afraid of the dark, so afraid that she couldn't sleep at night without a light on. Perhaps this is something that happened to you as a child. And so she went to the priest and she told him this story and said, Signora, what can I do about this? And he looked at her and he said, do you believe in God? And she said, yes, I do. And he smiled and he said, don't worry, because God is stronger than anything. And from that moment, she was free from that fear. So let's take heart from this story and not be afraid to ask ourselves, what is Satan and how does he appear in this world and in our lives? I remember one time that Swami Kriyananda said to us, if we're going to be soldiers, we need to be intelligent ones, and we need to understand who the enemy is. We need to know what the weapons of the enemy are. We need to know the strategies of the enemy. And so from time immemorial, the best way of knowing about your enemy is sending in spies. Okay. I mean, from prehistoric times down to today and yesterday, governments send spies in to know about the strengths and the strategies. So today, don't be afraid, we're going to be spies. Okay? We're going into the camp of the enemy, and we're asking ourselves, what are his weapons, and how can we deal with that? What are our weapons? Let's take a look first metaphysically. What is Satan? What is darkness all about? Master used to say that the purpose of our life is to entertain and instruct. So is this life entertaining? Sometimes we think it's not, and especially in these days when it doesn't seem to be entertaining. He called it the cosmic motion picture of life. So let's take a look at this cosmic motion picture. Where did it come from? Okay. It all started with darkness. That's interesting. From Genesis, I'm going to read from Genesis. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. So in the very beginning, there's darkness and light. There can't be one without the other. Do you believe in the light? Do you believe that there are channels of the light? Then we have to believe in the opposite, because that's how creation is. The principle is duality, not one without the other. So we must believe not only that there is darkness, but there are channels of darkness. Okay? There are channels of darkness in all levels of creation, from the human beings down to the viruses and the bacterias. There are channels of darkness, just as there are channels of light. And we human beings, because we have free will, we get to choose. For which one will we be a channel? So, the darkness and the light, they each have a purpose, and they have a job. What is the purpose of darkness? The purpose of darkness, it's his job. Okay, we're talking about the devil, about Lucifer. In the Indian tradition, it's called Maya. We're going to talk about Maya in a moment. It has a job, and the job of darkness, of Satan, is to keep us in this creation. And it does its job. And it does its job really well. It's very clever. It has lots of weapons, lots of strategies. Now, the light also has a job. And its job is to enlighten, to bring us out of the darkness and into the light, which is our reality. And so there's the contrast. And we see this contrast in many ways. I don't know if you enjoy art, if you love art. In the Renaissance, there was a technique that became popular and very well developed. The technique was called chiaroscuro, which means light and darkness. Have you ever heard of that? Are you familiar, perhaps, with the Vermeer painting, The Girl with the Pearl Earring? Who has seen that painting? The girl. Okay, almost everybody present. Any of you there? Can bring it to mind. What's so striking? There are many things that are striking, but what's so striking about that? It's the light on her face. The way the light shines on her face and on the earring. But what makes that light shine? The entire background of that painting is dark. It's black. And he painted it on a field of black. So we can come to know the light, the universal light, and the light that's in us when we see the contrast with what is the darkness. He's still in the Renaissance. Who was familiar with the paintings of Caravaggio? Anybody? Caravaggio, Bacchus, Medusa. Yeah, there's with Abraham trying to kill Isaac. Some fabulous paintings. He was a master of chiaroscuro, backgrounds, either black or very dark. Even the Mona Lisa. Think about the Mona Lisa. She's not on a black background, but she's on a darker background. And, the mystery and the love, comes out. Okay. So let's not be afraid of the darkness. Let's understand that darkness is here to help us to identify the light, to identify the channels of light, to identify the light within us. We see the same thing in literature. Is literature interesting if there is only a protagonist? Everything is fine, is born wealthy, falls in love with the daughter of the boss, they get married, they live in... No. Protagonist, antagonist. It's the antagonist that brings out the qualities. Swami Kriyananda has written a couple of plays. One of them is called The Jewel in the Lotus. If you haven't read it, I suggest it. I'm sure you'll find it somewhere. In The Jewel in the Lotus, it's a one-act play, and one of the characters is a young boy. His name is Narayan, and he's just in love with God. And in his village, there is a storyteller coming to the village to tell holy stories, and he wants to go. But his father, whose name is Ramu, is the antagonist in this. Ramu is very materialistic, and he doesn't want his son to be infected, by these fantasies of the storyteller. So he takes his family up into the mountain so that Narayan won't be there and won't be tempted by the fantasies of the storyteller. And so the story goes on. I'm not going to tell you the story. You have to read it. It's a short one-act play, extremely enjoyable. I'm not going to say any more because then I'll ruin it for you. So in art, in literature, in music, the dissonance and the resolution of the dissonance. So let's take a look without fear, with curiosity. Let's be spies, and let's see what are the strong weapons of Satan. Now, there's not enough time to talk about all of them, and there are many, and they are insidious, they're subtle. I'm going to talk about just two of them. One of them is creating division. We see that today. We see that every day. We see that in every period of history. Now, Satan, this dark force in Sanskrit, is called Maya. And I read or heard a story about the root of the word Maya. Okay. So Maya comes from the first part, Ma, which is mother. Okay. Mother. So here's the story. That in Vedic times or in ancient times, the mother of the house in the morning had the job of going out to milk the cows. She milked the cows, brought in the pail of milk, and then she separated it into, different pots to give to her different children. She separated, the cream to make butter from the liquid. Her job was to separate, okay? And this is what Maya is about. Maya is that force that separates. We see it so much and so sadly. I know people, you probably do too, brothers and sisters, love each other, grown up together, would do anything for each other. The parents pass away and leave a lot of money. What happens? They fight. I mean, oh my God, how they fight. And I mean, they just turn into monsters, and legal things and nasty things. It's just, it's painful, isn't it? How people who are united by love in a family, when the darkness of greed comes in, it creates divisions between them. A king who spends his whole life in uniting a reign, a kingdom, a realm, and leaves it to his children, what do? They break it up again. We know the story of Mahatma Gandhi. He spent his life dedicated to bringing together the different religions, especially the Hindus, the Muslims, the Sikhs, the Parsis, and in freeing his country. And then what happened? Terrible part of the history, When India became free, then it separated. The Muslims, to the north, created Pakistan, later Bangladesh, and then India. And even today in India, there's that energy that wants to separate, create separations between the Hindus and the Muslims. This is the devil just getting in there and trying to create separation. We can't let that happen, because when we do, our aura, our energy field, is open to the devil. So today, what kind of divisions do we see? Vax, non-vax. Doesn't matter. That's not how the devil is working. Of course, the devil is working through the virus. The virus is, according to Master, viruses or channels of the darkness. But the real devil today is creating the divisions. Within couples, within families, within communities. The devil is amongst us, and we need to fight back. We need to understand that God, the Spirit, is unity. There's the Hebrew. I see my Israeli friend here. The most famous prayer, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. One, not two. So we want to, in our lives, do everything we can to bring together our family, bring together our friends, to use our energy in things that bring us in a common sphere. Music unites, doesn't it? Beyond word. Art unites. Sports, ideally, unite. No, there were some touching things in this. I'm in the year 2021. There was just the Tokyo Olympics 2020 that happened in 2021. But weren't there some beautiful scenes? I don't know if you saw them. One of them was in the men's high jump. Is that right? It was the men's high jump, you know, where they keep putting the bar higher and higher. And two men, different countries, achieved the record, I think it was, you know, at least the Olympic record at that time, and they had a choice. Would they try to go higher to see which one, or would they share it? And just immediately they hugged each other, and it just makes me cry. You know, and just seeing them, you know, embracing and sharing it. And then in one of the races in the athletics, two runners fell, you know, and of course they lost the race. So they got up and arm, they finished the race. These are things that bring people together, and it's so important. What about in our inner world, in our inner kingdom? We need to remember who we are. I and my Father are one. You know, this unity. I'm not different. I'm not different from the other devotees. I'm not special. I'm not less. I'm not more. But I belong to the infinite spirit. Aham Brahman Asmi. You know, I and the infinite spirit Brahman. We are one. We have a wonderful technique that vibrationally carves this reality in all levels of our mind when we're meditating with the mantra Hong Sa. Vibrating with that little ego, Hong, and expanding it into the infinite spirit, Hong Sa. I am spirit. I am He. In our inner life, we want to repeat this again and again. Master recommended that before we practice affirmation, before we do any healing techniques, that we establish ourselves in that unity. And we repeat to ourselves, I and my Father are one, until we are convinced about that. That's what Master says. And when we are in that channel of unity, then we can do anything. As Master was saying, when the devil, even in material form, was trying to obstruct him, there was the grace of God. So let's eschew division, separation. Let's just fight against it. Any thought that separates us from someone else, thinking I'm better, I'm not as good, just judgment, criticism, we're opening the door to the darkness. And darkness exists in this world because people open the door for it. What is the second weapon that I'm going to talk about today? That's temptation. Temptation. And here we have the story of Jesus that we heard during the reading. Jesus, according to Yogananda, prepared himself, for 18 years going to the Far East, And when he was 30 years old, he came back prepared to take on the mission. He recognized his guru from former times. He asked to be initiated again by his guru with the baptism. And then what did Jesus do? He didn't go out and start preaching. He didn't go out and look for his disciples, all of which he did later. But he went up on a high mountain, and he fasted for 40 days, so the purification, and he was tempted by the devil. Oh, my word. Why was Jesus tempted by the devil? He was an avatar. He was free. You know, what did the devil have to do with him? Well, it's an example that even when we are baptized, when we come onto the spiritual path, we receive our initiation, we accept the guru, we're going to be tested. I mean, it's not, what should I say, a clean street, right? No, it's not. We're going to be tested just like Jesus was tested. His test was a very high one, very elevated. The devil tempted him to use his spiritual powers for material purposes. Will that happen to us? Eventually. The siddhis will come. We even have little siddhis, no? Being able to persuade people, to understand their thoughts. Let's not be tempted by those. But we are tempted by other things. A few things that tempt us. One is distractions. The devil tempts us to be distracted from our goal of finding God. I remember, I'll just tell you this one little episode. We were in a satsang many years ago here with Swami Kriyananda, and one of the devotees, dear person, he's still a very dear devotee and friend of ours, said to Swami very sincerely, he said, Swamiji, why don't you place more emphasis on protecting the environment? You know, I mean, Ananda should be engaged, actively engaged in protecting the environment. And Swami said to him, that is a very good cause, and it's important that there be people who protect the environment. But that's not my mission. That's not what Master gave me to do or gave Ananda to do, you know. And I can't do everything. I need to focus on what is my dharma and the dharma of the community. But if you feel passionate about it, then do so. You know, and do so with my blessings, if that's what you feel. Okay? So for some people, that might be a way into the light. For others, that might be a distraction. As we heard in the song, Devil Worship, there are many social ills. And are we going to fight those? You know, can support them inwardly. But if our mission and dharma in this life is to find God, we need to find the means that are ours in order to do that. There's so many things that distract us in today's life, distract us from our meditation. You know, there's the internet and this and that. And when we try to focus every day on God, there's a beep, beep, tick-tock. It just comes in. We need to close ourselves off from the distractions, focus on God. And let's remember that distracting us from our goal is one of the weapons of the devil. We're tempted by little things. You know, are we tempted by that dessert, by the chocolate, by the sugar, by the coffee? We can learn in little things to say no. I just heard a talk yesterday by one of our teachers, say yes to life. This is one of Swami's mottos. And Master says, say no to temptation. Say yes to life. Say no to temptations. I used to walk through the dining room on Monday, and every Monday the leftover dessert would be on a table so anybody could take it. Okay? So Monday, you know, I'd walk in for lunch, I'd see the table, no, pass by. Then I'd pass by the other, no. But I knew if I kept walking by that table, at some point the no would not be so strong. So I just stopped walking by the table. Master said, God does not expect us to overcome temptation. He expects us to resist it. And if we continue to resist, one day, and I'm quoting him almost literally, one day a hand will come down from heaven and break the chains that bind you. So our part is to resist temptation. His part is to free us from temptation. So let us remember what those weapons are. Division. Let us affirm often during the day. If you're Christian, I and my Father are one, or Aham Brahman Asmi, or Shema Yisrael, or Hong Sa. I am the bubble, make me the sea. And let's remember that little story from my friend that I told you at the beginning. She was afraid of the darkness, and the priest said to her, if you believe in God, He is stronger than anything. I've asked our musicians to sing the song for us, and first I'll ask for the offering, Nightingale. There's one part of this song that I wanted to mention. Nightingale is a song about this contrast. It's about chiaroscuro, you know. And one part of the song says, without silence, what is song? Without night, where is dawn? Were it not for men's woes, were it not for men's woes, who would smile at a rose? Amen.